but maybe we can just go ahead to the presentation.
Very good. So we'll do order introductions and stuff afterwards then,
Yeah,
right?
I think
Okay.
that sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here I will welcome those in attendance for the Ravenna River Basin Commission meeting on April 7th at 1 p.m. back in the beautiful meeting room here at TJPDC. And until the rest of our active voters get here, we will move on to our presentation with Ian Blair of Wetlands Watch, who is here to update us on the General Assembly.
Thanks so
Awesome,
much.
fantastic.
I'll stop sharing so you can take over.
There we go. Get this full screen. All right, before I begin, can you hear me? Does it sound good?
Yes. Sounds great.
Fantastic. All right, well, let me start my timer. I'd like to keep you on time as well as myself. Hello, I'm so excited to be talking with you. My name is Ian Blair. I work for a small nonprofit that works statewide in Virginia, based in Norfolk, Virginia, called Wetlands Watch. You may have heard us because we run the Catch the King Community Science Flood Mapping Initiative, where we all chase the king tides around coastal Virginia, put GPS markers, and then take that data and send it to VIMS to do some flood mapping, data collection, as well as ground proofing our flood models here in Virginia. You also may have heard us because we manage the Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professionals certification for the state of Virginia. So if you had conservation landscapers or landscapers that wanted to learn more about using native plants and maximizing native plants in specific ways and techniques of planting plants to slow down and mitigate and clean water, that is a training program that we use. But I am here to talk to you about the General Assembly because we are one of the few environmental nonprofits that actually has a little bit of money to do some lobbying. And so I had the unique privilege to just sit in a lot of the Natural Resource Committee meetings this session in 2026 for the General Assembly. And then in sitting in all those meetings, took some notes and tracked some bills, and I wanted to share some that may pertain to your commission, as well as just keep you aware of what trends happened here in Virginia in 2026. Also recognizing, kind of moving on, that we're not actually done. So if you're unfamiliar with how the process works, I think making sure everyone has a foundation. We just went through 60 days of our part-time legislature here in Virginia. It ended technically in March, but we are going to be coming back. The governor has a deadline of April 13th to either sign bills, amend bills, or veto bills. And then I'll explain more next steps, but we are at the very end. The dust is settling. We're slowly, I feel like every day there's a new press release of what the governor has signed, specifically with some sort of topic. So I think either today or yesterday, she did a whole bunch of bills on schools. And I'm just tracking to see how those go through, but technically it's April 13th that is her deadline to do all of those actions. So backing up, bills are introduced in the legislative process through some sort of committee. That committee then assigns a subcommittee to then debate the merits of the bill that's being discussed. So really, if you're thinking about looking at conversations around bills, those subcommittee meetings are the most important because that's where you hear from support and opposition. And then you can figure out, how people or any lobbyists are feeling about other bills in that. If that moves out of that subcommittee, it goes to the main committee. That main committee then brings it to the floor where it's heard 3 times. The first time is just to let everyone know. The second time is to amend any of the language. And the third time is to vote whether they want to pass it out of that chamber. Crossover is when both bills from the House and the Senate, House being the 100 delegates, the Senate being the 40 senators, send their bills over to make sure that they both agree in order to present all of these bills to the governor. And really, there are a lot of things that went through, and I'll talk more with specific bills and different moments throughout the General Assembly session that explain why some bills died and why some bills made it through. moving on forward, yeah, we are at the very end and we're waiting to see what gets signed. Generally, when bills, unless they have an enactment clause attached to them, everything gets enacted on July 1st if it does get signed by the governor. So current stats as of last week, it was interesting to see how many bills moved through it, but we had 3,637 total legislative items, which includes bills, resolutions, and joint resolutions. When we only look at bills, it was about, or when we look at the same type of legislative items in 2025, we had 3,107. So there was a 17% increase in legislative items. Moving on down to that second bullet point, out of the 3,637, 2,366 were bills. So that's a lot of bills that people were tracking. Of course, I'm an environmental nonprofit, so I really honed in on what was happening in these natural resource committees, and I can use what was in both committees as like a proxy. I was tracking pretty much 6% of all the bills. So it takes a network in order for everyone to follow other sort of bills and keep each other updated. I follow legislative updates across the Commonwealth with different nonprofits as well as PDCs to see what's on your legislative agendas with like TJ PDC as well as like HRPDC. Out of those 2,366 bills, 1,156 bills were passed. I looked at what the pass rate was in 2025, and I realized that this year was a 26% increase, but that pass rate of the actual for both the House and the Senate was about 48%. So most things did not make it through, which is not uncommon. When I look at just our little nonprofit, what we were tracking like 67 bills initially, most of them starting in the House. Most of them were bills, but we were watching some resolutions and watching some budget items. A little bit more, 52% died, but there were some good reasons, there's some bad reasons, and we're also tracking who the top patrons are, with Delegate Krizik leading with 5 bills in this previous session. Trying to explain also, sorry, if you have questions, I can take those at the end. Sometimes I go in a flow state and I've got, we can go back to any slides and talk about it. Bill overview, I went and looked at all the bills that we're doing. I reduced them to a policy area. And so, of course, like wetlands were number one. We looked at environmental justice, some governance, invasive species management had a really successful year this year compared to last year. But then there were a lot that didn't make it through. I recognize coastal resiliency that wouldn't really apply to this commission. However, that is something that we were tracking since I am based in Norfolk. That is top of mind, and it really didn't make it through. Most of this was because many of the coastal resiliency bills that were put forward had a fiscal impact. And for this first session, we were really trying to be lean and not have fiscal impacts because we don't know how federal uncertainty and all these cuts are going to impact. So everyone was kind of putting forward bills that weren't going to create a big budget lift, especially if it was coming from general funding. When we look at our priorities for our organization, just to show, most didn't pass, most passed. It was a mixed bag, and that was to be expected. It's the first term of a new governor administration. People are still figuring out what the priorities are, making sure that the budget was, affordability is the word for this season. And so any additional costs were looked and scrutinized very carefully when they went to the appropriations committee, and most of them didn't make it out. So with that being said, let's go and jump into some bills. I worked on 2 bills specifically, and the way I've structured this presentation for the rest of the 10 minutes is I'll talk about my 2 bills that I worked on really, really carefully, and I will also show you what it's like to be working in policy for these 2 bills. Then I'll go a little bit high level for some bills that I think would be interesting to you, and then I'll go even high level with just a category of bills and list the bills if you want to do research. But I was really passionate about HB 1356. This is from Delegate Congress Fowler in Virginia Beach. It did not end up making it, but it was really interesting to track it through the little bit of time. This, I feel like, would apply for your commission because we were trying to update the state precipitation design standards. I don't know if you're familiar with Atlas 14, Volume 13, or Atlas 15, Volume 1 and 2. But essentially, we in Virginia are using Atlas 14 Volume 2, which is a precipitation value data set that engineers use to design roads, bridges, culverts, and other sort of infrastructure projects. I think the data set is from like 1860 to 2000. So we've been using data that has not been updated for the last 26 years. We do have this new data set that's coming out, which is called Atlas 14 Volume 13. We're not entirely sure when it will come out. Here you can see this is a screenshot from the most recent NOAA report that came out in December of 2025. It says end of Q3 in fiscal year 2026. So hopefully it will come out soon, but it seems quite silly to build infrastructure projects using precipitation values that are not workable with the current precipitation climate. And so if you're building, for example, a culvert that's handling a 10-year storm from 1980, well, that 10-year storm, probably that volume of water is going to be increasing, so that culvert will be undersized. But we just spent money building a new culvert. So trying to increase our data so that we can plan for the future was one of the backgrounds in this bill. I'm gonna just escape and show you. So if you've never looked at bills or researched bills, this is the legislative information system. You can see a lot of really cool things of like how many bills there were in the entire place. You can look at them by statistics and measure what sort of were they introduced, passed House, passed Senate. You can also look up specific bills. So in this case, I'll look up HB 1356, and we can see what the actual bill was. If you have researched LIS in the past, you're like, whoa, this is a different color, it's a different format. They recently updated it in 2025, and this is like the first year we've been able to use this new updated system. Of course, there are learning curves for any time there's an update to an old system. The old system was, a nice maroon color. It had a pretty neat search feature. This has a neat search feature, but it takes a little bit of working around. You really need to know what you're looking for and then filter it out versus the old system. But one of the cool things is the history is always going to show you the most recent action that happened. But if we go back and just look at what this bill was, it was going to amend two sections of the Code of Virginia. One was like Chapter 33, which is VDOT's section, and the other was in Chapter, I think, 62, which is DEQ in the stormwater section. The reason it didn't end up working was because of this line, and this is where it's important if you are thinking about writing legislation. You will send a concept, or you can even send a language to the Department of Legislative Services, DLS. This is a group of lawyers that end up writing the drafts for these bills. This section right here that I've highlighted is one of the issues where it says, the board may adopt standards or issue guidance through regulation consistent with the subdivision A4, which is the part of the code that allows you to expedite through the APA system. Now, if we go and we actually click on this section, and we can see, okay, when can state agencies sort of skip public comment in that public process? And they're like, okay, anything like fixing rates or prices, any sort of internal stuff that doesn't need to be commented on, any sort of like just corrections of technical errors, and then here are the regulations. And so the big one right here was a regulation that are in section A, B, and C. It says necessary to inform where no agency discretion is involved. Now, for Atlas 14 Volume 13, there wouldn't be any discretion. You're just updating numbers. But Atlas 15 Volume 2 is a new data set that's looking into the future. And we would need to figure out as a state what curve in the future would we want to use. The similar way that sea level rise, NOAA had a low intermediate, and high curve. Which curve do we want to use? So there would be some discretion, essentially making this line unworkable. So the bill couldn't really move forward. Oop, wrong bill. Going back. Talk about that bill next time. So we met with a bunch of different stakeholders as one of the environmental nonprofits that were leading this bill, tried to workshop, but everyone at the table, DEQ, VDOT, we all realized that we probably should take the summer to talk about how we want to move forward with figuring out what the state precipitation values are in the future. And everyone decided to, as a voice vote, continue to 2027. This will probably not be taken up in 2027, and we will have a new bill that will be reshaped and reformatted to be a workable bill. Go back here. And so, yeah, Atlas 14, Volume 13 includes Virginia, and then we have this timeline of it's supposed to be out in 2027, which is Atlas Volume 1 and Volume 2. And the big difference between Atlas 14 and Atlas 15 is this idea of non-stationarity, where there are changing environmental conditions with each gauge. And so they're sort of averaging different gauges as opposed to having single points doing these giant concentric circle radiuses, which then creates a seamless type of precipitation data over the continuous United States, as opposed to having like breaks at state lines where if it's not in the region, they're not going to update. So it's exciting if it comes out. The other bill that we worked on was HB 214, and this was going to help localities establish a home flood protection assistance program. I think the background of the bill that's important is that we have a fund called the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund. And Delegate Fagans, who's also from Virginia Beach, knows about this fund and also recognizes that Virginia Beach property owners are having flood issues. The city of Virginia Beach has a stormwater service that can go out and help people understand their flood issues and their stormwater issues on their property, but it's missing that funding component. And so he wanted to put forward a home flood protection assistance program. The one thing, and I will minimize out, is that we actually already have a bill that came through in 2021, which was Senate Bill 1309, and that was authorizing the local stormwater management funds to be used for flood mitigation and protection measures. Northern Virginia, particularly Fairfax, and that area has already been successfully using this sort of program since it came out, as well as I think, I'm going to go back one more. I think there was another bill in 2023. Here it is, yeah. Senate Bill, was it 440? Senate Bill 1091, which also allowed private property owners as well as like common interest, condominium interests, condominium communities to also tap into this fund. So if you're having flood issues in localities within the commission, they may be already empowered to use the local stormwater management fund to help resolve those stormwater issues. And when introducing a bill like this, there was an issue of $3,000 per household, whereas I think it's $5,000 in the other grant. So you were already limiting it. The other thing was a lot of the localities were uncomfortable with this on-site assessment by the locality, which was just going to increase the amount of the staff load with a limited staff capacity. There were rumors that a nonprofit started this bill, but I don't know anyone who would want to be the third-party administrator to try to figure this out. And when talking with the delegate, it seemed like he was really trying to tap into the RVR funds that haven't been actualized as of late and trying to connect them to issues that he's seeing in the locality that he represents. So those are the two bills that I know the most about because I was in almost all of the meetings. But let's moving back over and just go through all the other bills really quickly. HB 52, this is when we dredge canals. I know not necessarily, maybe, no. When we dredge canals, essentially that material gets dumped off in the ocean. And since sea level rise is impacting wetlands, there's this new technique called thin layer placement or marsh elevation enhancement that takes that dredge material, if it's clean, creates a slurry and then sprays it on top of wetlands, and that then sediment goes down for wetlands to regrow and then move up with the quick sea level rise rates. HB 237, also wetlands bill, was just adding, not to conserve Virginia, now it's to the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan, where my wetlands will try to migrate so that we can prepare if it's a rural area to try to use Conserve Virginia or another sort of acquisition fund to prevent the death of wetlands when they hit a bulkhead, the water is rising, they don't rise with it, and then they just turn into a mud flat. So this is just a mapping service that will be added to the Coastal Resiliency Master Plan and potentially figure out how we will deal with the prioritization of this in a future bill. HB 521 is a fun bill where everyone in Virginia has been acting as if we have no net loss as a policy. And it turns out we didn't have no net loss in the Code of Virginia for the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. And this bill was just adding a single line in the bill to say, hey, we're recognizing it in the Chesapeake Bay Agreement. We also have it in DEQ, but for VMRC, it's just making sure that no net loss of acreage and functions was codified. HB 390 created an Habitat Policy Oversight Committee. There are a whole bunch of really cool shoreline adaptation techniques that are happening right now, and we need a policy committee to figure out if this is actually meeting our goals of like what a living shoreline is, for example, and have someone like be the arbiter of moving forward with all of this innovation that's happening in the field, figuring out how we want as a state to move forward without selectively giving permits here and not there, making sure that we have a standardized sort of approach moving forward. HB 487 and SB 192 were for the coastal storm risk management system. We see these big projects specifically with coastal storm and coastal surge, and so the Army Corps has 3 projects in the Hampton Roads area, and one of them was to try to figure out how you can give state-owned bottom land to localities so that they can then put projects on it. It was killed, but not because it was bad. They just ended up putting it into the budget language, so it's being legislated through the budget so that it can be moved forward. HJ 16, continuing the Joint Subcommittee on Recurrent Flooding. This is really the only place in the General Assembly where we're talking about flood issues, and so it's going to be continued for another 2 years. They did change the language because they accidentally put forward an older version that only looked at coastal flooding, and so then they were able to change it for this HJ 16 for the entire state. HB 389, Climate Adaptation Plan for Fisheries in Chesapeake Bay. It was one of the first bills to die, and it was because of that fiscal impact. Essentially, sea level rise is drowning fish habitat, and so if we lose wetlands, we lose our fishing industry, and this plan will help figure out if there are places that are hotspots that we really, really, really need to protect in order to maintain the fishery industry. HB 641, as well as SB 393. This is Virginia's Great Outdoors Tax, and this gets into the data center question. A lot of people were looking at the data center tax exemption at the state level, and if you roll that back and no longer give it an exemption, you just open up a whole bunch of revenue for the state. Senator Perry wanted to use that money to then help fund land conservation, and it did not make it out. Both of them because of how, if you've been following the General Assembly and why we're having a special session on April 23rd, is we need to figure out how the state wants to move forward with either allowing data centers to continue building through an exemption or removing that exemption and taxing it, and then potentially slowing down that industry. HB 256 as well as HB 257 were both environmental justice bills. They were from 2024. They were just not really continued because it's not the proper word, but they just borrowed that same language and ran it again this year. It is it's I know it says it requires cities that have a population of over 20 and counties of over 100,000 to consider adopting environmental justice strategy in the next comprehensive plan. So this is part of that Dillon rule confusion where the state needs to empower locality and other political eligible subdivisions to do actions. And this one passed. And it's just thinking about, we use land use planning because we're looking at the use, but not necessarily people. And so if we're thinking through uses like data centers are a great example, making sure if we are zoning those, thinking about the impacts on the communities that live around them. SB 197 amends the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. And right now, so if you take a loan out with the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, there was a high interest rate. This one, it's not a high rate interest rate, it's actually 2.2%. But it defers the interest until the project is complete, and this aligns with historic federal climate projects. So that, if you're like trying to do an RFP, but the interest is still accruing, suddenly at some point for a locality, that doesn't make sense. So no, that interest is deferred until the project is complete or the study is complete. HJ 20, thinking about managed retreat. And this one was just looking at legacy property owners facing sea level rise. It was a limited scope, and it wanted to have JLARC, or the Joint Legislative Research Commission. I can't remember what the A is.
That sounds right.
Thank you. Was continued to 2027. Now we're going high level. There was a bunch of disaster. Disaster response was something on people's mind. There were HB 904, which wanted to have the Virginia Disaster Assistance Fund have amendments to align it with the state resilience planning principles. While this bill did die, it just moved the language because technically the Virginia Disaster Assistance Fund doesn't exist in the Code of Virginia, and it's hard to legislate something that's not in the code. So it was recommended that they just put this as budget language underneath that budget item. I think it's 102. HB 937 was the Virginia Resiliency Grant Program that was going to give $100,000 to people impacted by Hurricane Helene and other future disasters. Unfortunately, fiscal impact, they were limited on how money was being spent, so that one was tabled pretty quickly. HB 1189 and its companion SB 635 wanted to. So when you look at a disaster preparation, you have to declare it a state of emergency in order to activate those dollars. Virginia has now created something called the state of preparedness, which activates the money without having to declare an emergency. This will help with the public reception of like, oh no, the governor has declared a state of emergency, but then, for example, the snowstorm that I think the second one that came through this winter in February, nothing really happened. And so everyone's like, wait, we declared something, but I didn't really see any snow happen. So the state of preparedness helps resolve that, like, we're going to be prepared for something, but it's not actually an emergency. And then there was an emergency management capabilities work group that changed drastically. It's now a work group. Initially was going to give a whole bunch of emergency management capabilities for localities all over, including at one point, every locality was going to get an emergency car. But that got watered down because of the fiscal impacts. Tribal affairs, a lot of them died, but it was just for consistency. They're going to use the tribal commission to continue to talk about how they want to move forward with these consultations between governments and governments. The General Assembly wasn't entirely sure moving forward, but one of the things that we were looking at were these tribal conservation easements. Some tribes want to do nature-based solutions on their lands, but they need to have a conservation easement in order to do that. So there's this land title issue that needs to be resolved. Disclosure reform. So flood disclosure is not actually in Virginia. We have a limited type of disclosure that only discloses repetitive loss properties, which is like 0.0002% of properties in Virginia. Virginia, based off of a Milliman report that came out in January of 2025, is like the fourth highest state in their study that sells properties that have already been flooded. So it is a problem in Virginia where we're like kind of playing hot potato with flood houses that continue to flood but aren't being disclosed. And so two things that happened was the Board of Housing and Community Development has these ad hoc groups that now need to disclose the votes. Essentially, if it goes there, sometimes bills that are discussed kind of just disappear. And so there's now going to be a process with HB 951. And then Delegate Converse Fowler, who did the first repetitive loss disclosure back in 2021, it brought HB 1518, and this is a buyer beware work group to like figure out if our buyer beware that seems like we keep amending, is it going to be reversed? Is it transparent enough? So a bunch of lawyers, there's a work group that's going to be put together with the Bar Association, the Virginia Homeowners Association, and the Housing Commission to figure out what they want to do with buyer beware. Things that might be interesting to you guys is PFAS monitoring. There were 3 bills that made it through. One, I mean, they're kind of limited in scope, but HB 938 requires industrial users to self-report PFAS discharges to DEQ. Self-reporting is, I'm just going to do that hand motion. But I guess it's a step forward. We have to know what's going on with industrial users. HB 1072 allows local governments to test sewage sludge for PFAS, and then HB 14433 prohibits land application of sewage sludge with high PFAS levels. We don't want manure and growing, crops with sludge.
Okay. Remember the top one.
Data centers. There were so many data center bills. I'm only giving 4 that I'm aware of, and data centers, that tax exemption has been eyed by other people. And there was one for teacher salaries, and it's just been the big question mark. So I'll be really curious to see what happens on April 23rd. But the 2 things that did pass were data centers have this really interesting issue where if you go out with a microphone and try to record sound, it actually doesn't have a decibel type of feature. It's a frequency issue. And so the decibels, it will be very low, but you can still hear it because human ears hear different frequencies. And so HB 153 allows the sound profile for site assessment of data centers. If you're living close to a data center, it might be annoying having this like low frequency sound all the time. And then HB 507, if there are emergency tier 4 generators that data centers have to have redundancies because of the way that their business model works, there is a permit now required that DEQ is going to be looking through to make sure that there is no air pollution, or what the air pollution is. They're going to start monitoring that for the permit. RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, we're going back into it. Technically, it's through the Caboose bill that funds the government until July 1st. We will be effective July 1st, and as far as I'm aware, there is a plan to participate in the September auction so that then there is going to be new funding. We will no longer need to depend on general funding for the Community Flood Preparedness Program or the Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency Grant Funds. And so those will be rebuilding since we've been using one-time appropriations for the last, I want to say, since 2023, 2024. Budget tracking, we'll find out. That's the big answer. We will find out on April 23rd. Will we continue the tax exemption or will we not? The Senate wants to discontinue and use that tax to help pay for state programs. House wants to continue because there's economic development. Based on the last time I was following it, which was, I want to say 2 weeks ago, things may have changed. Executive orders are also interesting, and I've noticed that a bunch of agencies are now using these orders, and the 2 big ones for that the environment community cares about, and I imagine you guys would, is E01 and E03, which is the statewide affordability directive. This is for agencies trying to figure out how they can lower everyday costs for Virginians, and then how to streamline housing regulations. And I've noticed everyone talking about that at the most recent Environment Virginia Symposium that happened at the end of March. And next steps, we're gonna have the governor can veto or amend on April 13th. Let me just go back and just bullet. Then we'll have a veto session. So the General Assembly takes these amendments and can either accept it or reject it. And if they reject a veto, it then goes back to the governor. But before then, we have a special session to figure out that budget bill. And then May 25th is the deadline for the governor to sign. It's a 30-day period plus the holiday. That's why it's not necessarily May 22nd. And that's when the governor can either veto the General Assembly's response or can sign forward. And then everything becomes, unless there's another enactment clause, generally on July 1st. Cool, we blew through that. Thank you for listening. I can ask and answer any questions now.
All right.
Thank you, Ian.
Oh,
Who's
well,
got a question for Ian? Before I start on my list, I'll go last. Not I've been taking notes. What do you think, folks? Yes, thank you. And Ian, there were several slides that you had that we did not. So if you would send your updated deck to Izzy, then she can circulate it for all of us, because that would be great. The
yes.
last 6 or 7 maybe. But, well, I will ask a couple just to generate some discussion. I think the gauges, I was interested tangentially in your water gauges business and all the concentric circles and all that stuff, because was anybody caring about the fact that the data for precipitation in the countryside of Virginia just is awful? I mean, the gauge that we run under is 100 miles away and
Yes.
stupid. And we don't get recognition for the severe drought we've had for 6 months until last week. So
yes,
that anywhere on the table, or is what you were describing completely different from that concern?
that the Atlas 14 and Atlas 15 are separate from creating new USGS or NWS, either rainfall gauges or stream flow gauges. They are connected, but the numbers that they're creating in Atlas 14 and 15 are just engineering numbers, and they're not necessarily, they're like on the probability of a specific type size storm that are happening, as opposed to like what's actually happening on the ground.
Okay.
It's to address the intensity increase. The storms are
More frequent and horrible. Yeah.
intense now.
Okay.
Or decades ago, and it's consistent. So if you're planning to build a bridge or a road and you're building it to a standard that's 30 years ago,
Oh, yeah,
it's gonna get washed out.
absolutely. No, that part I understood just fine. It's just, I get wired up in the statistics stuff. So thank you for that explanation. Jumping on to Native Virginia Indian tribes, does the General Assembly have to act in order to get them into the table conversations that the Chesapeake Bay Act? Was that anywhere discussed in the bills that you watched? Because I know they're being systematically still excluded from the whole program discussion.
Yes. There was even more tribal affairs bills that were in the General Assembly. I wasn't the lead on it. I was just following it because I recognized it was a trend that was happening. As far as I'm aware, Delegate Prizik, who runs the Tribal Commission, would be the person I would talk to actually answer that question.
Okay, thank you. I wrote that down. I love what you said about the data center sound metrics. Yeah. Because we have had various industrial operations. The one in my district was a low hum that took 1.5 years to be found. It was a mismatch in the new equipment versus old equipment at a lumber yard. People were going completely stark bonkers because they could not sleep for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's really challenging. So in addition to that, and I know friends in Northern Virginia are completely ruined by the fact that Loudon has allowed these things to be put right up to the sidewalk, right next to a neighborhood, and really don't care what the impacts are. They're so interested in the money. So I'm really glad that somebody's starting to look at that, because we need that extra information to be able to get those things going.
Fully agree. And there was a great presentation at last year's American Planning Association Virginia chapter. I think Prince William County, as well as Loudoun County, were there. Potentially, you actually may have come out of the Charlottesville area.
Okay. Conference. I'll look that up. Thank you very much. Other questions? Yes, go ahead, Jason.
On the fund to resolve non-structural flood issues for citizens to get some money, potentially, is that a locality has to adopt this, or what's required of each locality? We don't have coastal flooding issues, but we do get hurricane. Nelson County had the record hurricane in the state, so it's not without And given that insurance companies are basically denying coverage now for flooding all over the country, I'm curious what this localities have to do to get into that.
It is now localities as of 2021 now have the ability to adopt an ordinance to create a stormwater management fund. And then in 2023, that was expanded not just to be erosion and stormwater issues, but also flood issues for larger, condominium projects that, shared
Well,
property community space. So they would have to adopt that and then create a budget within that locality. But they are now empowered to, as opposed to the Dillon rule way of you have to ask the state for permission to do that.
So there's no funding, it's just enabling this local ordinance.
Yeah, they can create a stormwater fee.
Right, but there's no.
We've had that for
there's no
years.
state funding.
No, doesn't sound like there's any state funding.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Potentially SLAF could be.
In other words, they could take some of the state SLAF funding if they wanted to and use it for that. Okay.
Yeah. Let me
Okay.
check. I'm gonna check on that for you. That's a good question for me to actually
Great.
figure out.
I'm curious if that's what funds ACAP and CCAP at the city, which is like the additional funding
Right.
those counties in the city have to support the Virginia Conservation Assistance Program. I'm just curious.
I don't
They
know.
are not. They are not. VCAP is funded through general appropriations, and
Yes,
so
but the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County have ACAP and CCAP where they're offering additional funds to match VCAP. So
Oh,
it's like
cool.
a separate local program, but yeah,
Okay.
I know VCAP is funded, yeah, that way.
VCAP was the number one asked budget request. So early, right before crossover, every single delegate and senator can go up to the appropriations committee and ask for 3 items. And I sat through the entire 4-hour meeting of everyone running through that. And VCAP was, I think, 11 times on the House side and either 5 or 6 times on the Senate side, which I found amazing. The House had 2 million. House had 2 million, Senate had 8 million. So potentially there may be a budget number when this budget happens on April 23rd. That's in between those 2 numbers, which isn't enough, but it is something.
Mhm.
And it's only for 1 year.
Exactly, only for 1 year.
How much was
And then
it
we do
funded the last cycle?
It had all of its needs met in 2023 and 2024. And then because it was still growing, more people got interested, and then we needed more. We've seen it blossom, and it's a good cost share program that both uses nature. You can use rain gardens, rain barrels, etc., to also hit our conservation needs, prevent that nitrogen and phosphorus from going into any sort of water bodies like the Chesapeake Bay or Southern rivers.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, it saves a lot of people's structures as well and backyard damage. It's,
Yes.
I think this year we've had 3 non-river but cloudburst floods that have resulted in death in the last, 3 years. And they were 3 constituents of mine, unfortunately. But none of these things are really helping us because we're all still totally unprepared. So 7 inches of rain falls in Upper Jarman's Gap where there happens to be in a ravine, just like what happened in Nelson County, and turns a little 18-inch wide stream into a 50-acre wide raging river that drowns a child. So I just only share that because it's sort of a very personal insight into why we need so much better planning and data and understanding that we can't just look away anymore. And I'm not sure that the legislators really get it, that the people are dying and they're up there frou-frouing around talking about statistics. And I want something real that we can say, we're not going to put houses in these places anymore. We're not going to do what Houston did and put all the poor people living in the bottomland where they all get drowned or flooded out in the big hurricane. But I don't foresee much optimism on that even for this session. So they're much more busy deciding that they know much better than local government about everything. So that'll be how that all turns out. Thank you. Any more
No,
questions?
thank you.
All right. Well, this is wonderful. I'm glad you were down there. I know that all of you, Wild Virginia, and all of you working together to cover all the bases. It's like whack-a-mole. That's for sure.
Yes. Yes.
You, Ann.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ian.
Okay.
Gotta get rid of the Dylan rule.
Well, or some new people who actually do their homework.
Yeah.
We will now jump back to the beginning, since we now have a full cohort of people, and let's go ahead and get Ibby to read us do the introductions, attendance, and
Yes.
electronic meeting notice and all that stuff.
We don't have to do the electronic
Oh, goody.
meeting notice
Okay.
because nobody has participated
Okay,
virtually. But for attendance, Ann Malik.
yes,
B. Lepisto Kirtley.
Yes.
Lonnie Murray. Michael Payne.
Here.
Jen Fleischer here. Jason Albert.
Here.
Timothy Hodge. Tony O'Brien.
Yeah.
Reese Peck.
Here.
Tim Goolsby.
Here.
Marie Durr. Alexander Rico Vidalis. Steve Morris. And Aaron Mills.
Here.
well, thank you all for being here. Now, did anybody have anything to add to the agenda before we jump in and adopt it so we can charge through the rest of our meeting here? No other items. All right, we need a motion then to approve the agenda. Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Any opposed?
I would have to. abstain,
All right,
Cause
we are set.
abstain.
Okay. Very good, thank you. And then for meeting minutes from August 19th, are there any additions or corrections? Do we have a motion to adopt the minutes of August 19th? Thank you. Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
And two abstentions. Okay, excellent. Thank you all very much. We'll get you next time, because you're here today. That's great.
Okay.
All right, and am I correct? We have no public people here at the moment.
Correct. And
So
no
we'll jump-
comments were received.
Jump over that, no comments. All right, on to election of officers and appointment of executive committee.
Yes. So I'm just gonna pull up the bylaws here. See what page I'm on. Okay. So the commission shall elect a chair, vice chair, and treasurer. Eligibility to be considered for an officer position is restricted to existing commission members and preferably should come from members representing different jurisdictions. The officers of the commission shall consist of a chair, vice chair, and treasurer chosen from among serving commissioners. Their term shall extend from the first meeting of a calendar year until the first meeting of the next calendar year. Officers may be re-elected for one additional consecutive full term, but upon a unanimous vote may serve for additional terms. Where practicable, no more than one officer shall represent a locality or organization and should include at least two persons elected by the voters of their respective city or county. Yeah, that's all that's really applicable here.
Do we have any volunteers? I will confess, I have been sitting in the chair role for many years and I'm happy to be booted out if anybody wants, but happy to.
And our
Continue on.
current roles, just for everybody's, she's been the chair, and then Lonnie Murray has been the treasurer, and Reese Peck is the vice chair.
Excellent. Reese, do you want to take up chairship? Willing to continue in vice chair?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine doesn't have a choice, so.
Lonnie's not here and he's already signed all the bank cards, so unless somebody's dying to be treasurer and wants to troop around to all the banks and sign all those damn cards again, then I would support leaving him in that role. That would be good. All right.
I will, we got one and Alec as chair.
Second.
I'll just all say.
Yeah, let's do the whole thing. Go ahead.
Yeah.
And Reese Peck as vice chair.
Reese Peck and Lonnie Murray.
Yep.
For vice chair and probably for
Second.
Very good. Any more discussions or others who wish to comment? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, well, thank you all very much. That's great. We will charge on and do our very best.
And just the executive committee. So one other section about that. We shall establish an executive committee. It consists of 5 members, the chair, vice chair, and treasurer, and 2 additional non-officer members. They shall be elected annually on the first meeting of the calendar year and serve until the first meeting of the next. When possible, the executive committee should be representative of all localities that make up the RRBC. And Lonnie represents Albemarle, just FYI, and racist within.
Okay,
We
good.
have Albemarle within.
And are the meetings, I know in off months, sometimes the executive committee meets, are those virtually most of the time?
Yeah, they're most often virtual, and we typically meet just 1 to 2 times
Okay.
per year outside of the full board.
So those meetings are not considered public meetings.
They still are public meetings. Yeah, I think we just have to switch every other to being virtual in person. Yeah.
Very good. So would Tim in Green are you available to represent Green as a virtual?
I may pass that on to Reed,
Oh, okay,
because she is kind of semi-retired.
okay, might be able to do it more.
I'm not officially retired, so I have not limited days for meetings during the day, it's kind of
Hard, okay,
hard to get.
all right.
I may try to pass that on to her when I speak to her.
Okay.
I may get your name, but I will pass the information on
All
her,
right.
see if she would.
Hopefully that would work. The Michael or Jen, do you have availability for, I mean, when we've met? It's always been during the day that we've had the executive committee meetings, and they have not been terribly lengthy.
No,
So it's usually solving some emergency thing or whatever that needs.
or
to be
just a
done.
little extra support with RRBC planning
Yeah.
along the way.
For
That's
the
typically
conference
when
planning
we've
and things
met.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay,
The conference.
Same.
okay. Well, you guys fight it out.
Okay. Like right now, I'm not yeah, I should be able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, then we will nominate Jen Fleischer then to be representing the city on the executive committee. And we already have then city, Flavanna County, and where are we missing?
Green.
Yeah.
I guess, but we'll
And
wait.
Green, okay.
Right.
And we'll wait to see, and hopefully Marie can join up and that'll be good. Wonderful. Thank you, thank you. And do we need a vote on the executive committee, or are we just doing that by acclamation?
It's, yeah, they shall be elected. so-
Okay. So I move, I think I'm allowed to do that our executive committee representatives include Jen Fleischer, Lonnie Murray, and Reese Peck. And hopefully Marie Durham. Tell her she was elected. How about that?
Told, yes.
Voluntold to show up. How's that?
Okay, wait, so one more time, Reese, Jen, Marie, and Lonnie.
And Lonnie.
I think
right.
there's one more though.
And then
And,
Chair and Vice.
right,
Okay.
it's everybody
Chair,
that's
Vice Chair,
appointed.
plus
Duh.
the 3.
Sorry, I
Okay.
just zoned out. Okay.
Super. And we have a second for our executive committee slate. We have a second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, we are now represented by an executive committee. Excellent. Perfect. Are we square on that? And
Yes.
ready to charge on to potential Tenasca something? Well, tell us about the Tenasca number 8.
Yes. So I'll just go ahead and read, well, actually, I'll pull it up and I can.
Oh,
Just
this sounds like blood
describe.
money, actually. I'm not sure. It's worth it.
Unpinned.
Sounds a lot like Dominion's $5 million for Biscuit Run. But only if they got their compressor station in Buckingham. Jeez. I thought Rick Randolph was gonna kill me. He had gone off all by himself and arranged all this stuff with Dominion, and I pulled the plug on him at the board meeting and said, this was never discussed, and I absolutely will not take money from the Union Hill Church people, that they're the ones who should get the money, not Albemarle County.
He did not know that he had to discuss it with the rest of the
Well,
board.
it was just. You undercut me. That's fine. You're not the king.
So this is actually not something that we'll need to vote on quite yet, but just as an item to provide you with the latest information that we have regarding restrictive covenants approved as part of the Tenasca project recently in Fluvanna County. If approved by the RRBC, this would provide the RRBC with $5,000 annually in perpetuity upon the commercial operation date of such project. Our donations acceptance procedure included in the packet states individual donations above the specified $1,000 amount shall be brought before the commission to vote on acceptance and direction for the donations use. Since it will likely be a few years until the project is completed, we will not vote on this today, but can consider potential uses for a funding source such as this and discuss it overall. And there's about 10 minutes on the agenda to discuss this as of now. Yeah.
They actually use the word in perpetuity.
Yeah, I can.
As long as they're in business.
As long as it's running.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe, okay, yeah, that's.
So
fair.
at one point you said 5,000 and then later it said 1,000. So I
I-
must have heard wrong.
I was mentioning our donations acceptance procedure
Okay,
internally
got it.
to the RRBC. So if it's above $1,000, the commission
Has to accept.
will, yes.
Got it. Okay.
And this is $5,000 and
We're talking, what, 31, 32.
Right.
Before the students, yeah. If it begins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we set that one?
that's a question.
That's what we have to think about.
What's the current budget?
For the last 15 years or so, it's remained at $10,500 a year. But I think it was just 2 years ago, our executive director kind of came back to the boards and said it makes more sense for us to slightly increase this over the years, just with inflation and things. So I think this year it's like a little bit over 12,000, and is slated to increase like 6% annually, I think.
So there'll be a cost of living.
But historically, it's much larger budget. Even in the hundreds of thousands.
Well, that was that original NIFWIF grant, which was to do all the research and update the state of the basin and all those
Right.
reports and,
But there was active there.
yeah, and active grant writing and
That,
demonstration projects in each of the counties and stuff. And then when that went away, everything sort of shrank back down to trying to be the glue that helps the communities all work together on various water projects.
So question, is the 12,000 and I'm first meeting, is the 12,000 a year, that's our budget?
Yes,
And that comes from all the four different counties?
yes. Based on population.
Yeah.
Based on population?
There's a formula.
Well, there's a formula, everything has a formula, got it?
For background purposes, I wanted to kind of negotiate this with NASCA. There were essentially 3 environmental requests that we put in with NASCA with regard to the passage of the power plant. One was maintaining the 2024 EPA standards, as all the EPA has essentially get guided and its regulations are being enforced, but NASCA agreed to maintain those 2024 standards. The second, which did not pass, was we were hoping to put in a matching solar panel program, home solar panel program. And the county decided it was not portion, but that would have been $2 million to NASCA. And then and I feel like it's kind of and so that didn't pass. And then there was this, which was, a request basically, given that there's right out here, we're basically commission and the RCA and so on, all participate in the monitoring the quality of the streams within Fluvanna County throughout the area. I felt that it was a great way to provide some additional funding to the RRBC. In particular, I thought it would be a great way to enhance and the confidence of the board. But there's no specifics and there's no requirements and there's no need to recognize to NASCA or any of those lines. Just to flat out, there's $5,000 a year. That's probably gonna last 30, 40 years. So you can look at this with $150,000, $200,000 grant. But that's the background. I'm happy to take any questions. Like that. Yes.
So my question is, that would give us 5,000 additional dollars. Could we use that for the benefit of the RBBC? I mean, that would greatly enhance, okay, then you know what, myself, and I know. I don't mind taking their money. It's gonna help us, and I don't mind taking their money, because otherwise. Yeah, that doesn't bother me. I know it's
Okay.
maybe a philosophical thing, or I know how Ann feels, but you know what?
I may take the money too.
Oh, okay, well.
Wait, takes the money and beat him over the head with it. How
Well,
about that?
See, that's what I was thinking of, but I didn't
Sorry,
want to say
Tony.
that. Just kidding.
Keep in mind that Matt got power. Because of the full power.
Right,
We're still trying.
Right.
You
Sure.
mentioned those, that's.
So the particulate standards that you, the EPA standards from 2024, you mentioned, that's the P2.
PM 2.5 level.
Okay. Okay.
How would that?
So there are actually monitors that they put on top of their towers and.
What's the mechanism?
That's all managed by these people.
So the EPA doesn't enforce it.
No, it doesn't. But again, it was really about the technology behind it, because one has to.
Excuse me.
Take it forward. Yeah.
I vote yes. I don't think we're voting today. Okay, take care.
So they probably go back to it. So it wasn't necessarily a huge massive per se. Of that to do it, because obviously they probably already first seen it, using it for those things, but it was just the way it showed. Strive for those. So the way that the actual measurement is, they look at the fields, you know, at a certain disbursement. That's standpoint, so. That's good.
Is the enforcement through the special use permit or through the?
I mean, it is not a special use permit, it's a restrictive covenant. So there is no enforcement in the restrictive covenant, so.
So they don't have to cease operation if they don't do this.
They don't have cease operations.
Okay. But you'd have a civil action against yeah. Yeah. Well, I do know
Again,
that,
I think their viewpoint was basically standards are like put back in, and if not, even further tight, so there's just no reason.
Yeah.
Give them a reason to not use the equipment that would meet those standards.
sure, sure. Well, that the 2.5 is sort of the minimum for. Well, it should be a whole lot lower is all I'm gonna say, to avoid respiratory damage, but we'll fight that some other day. Jason, do you have deer in the headlights, look, any sense of whether under the new administration, DEQ will actually step up and start to live up to its authority? Because I know from the PFAS stuff and everything else, they've been running the other way for the whole last 4 years, so.
I don't know what
Okay,
the administration will do with the current, this Tenasca plan, my understanding is in the process of applying for the state limits. They have not had an issue, so this, accepting this year is premature, I would say.
oh, yeah.
It's good to know that this was negotiated. And, I envision lawsuits over those state limits, so it's gonna drag out.
Okay.
I was volunteering with RCA earlier last month and ran into one of the previous commissioners for the RRBC, Angus Murdoch. And he's a board member he was for the TJ Soil and Water Conservation District. But he had mentioned, because he's a Fluvanna County resident and he's been very engaged in the process, that it might be interesting to use this funding to do studies on how the water intake from a plant like this is affecting flow between the James and Rivanna, I believe.
Yeah, that's that. I spoke to him quite a bit about that too, so that's obviously the RRBC will decide how they want to use that. I should note that there was one other condition that was put in place. And that was that the water will not be taken from previously first Tenasca Power Plant used Cunningham Creek as a discharge line for the water. There was too much water running, so it was disrupting the flow of the creek. It was then moved to the Rivanna, and so they also made up a condition, special conditions to not use
Tributaries.
Tributaries. This first go by that.
And was the infrastructure around the outfall properly done at the river? Since when it was moved from the creek to the river, I mean, did they do a decent job of that? Okay,
Small town.
all right,
That RCA, they would essentially pump it due to the efforts of the RCA.
yeah, because the creek was getting totally destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the volume was too high. Okay,
Is there any agreement on the temperature of the injected water?
Yeah, so the way that, there's no like agreement on the temperature, the typical cooling process is they have all the water coming in, it sits in their cooling ponds for a period of time. Then it flows under pipes underground for however many miles, escape probably about 4 miles without anything. Just cooling temperature at the peak of summer is, I think they had it about 90 degrees was kind of the maximum that they had an output. Very the winter is but it's not 100 degrees or anything like that. That's currently, I'm aware of there's no disruption from the existing plant. As far as cooling, as far as temperature of the water can destroy.
I think that we're a river stewardship body and accepting payment from a project that's discharging into the Urbana, it probably risks our credibility at some level and our independence, and if particularly if that $5,000 for a $2 billion product is pretty negligible contribution, but if that's not tethered to anything enforceable or meaningful, I'd rather do a study with another $5,000 grant and measure those without that input, so.
lots to learn.
Yeah,
To be clear, it's $5,000.
sure, and that, you're right, $200,000 over a long time. I mean, which we could probably meaningfully use, but I don't wanna risk our independence or credibility for future boards either.
Well,
And this could be changed annually as well.
it's gonna be 5 years from
Yeah.
now for it to go down. I think the point is to discuss, like, what if you did that about having this, lives down, there's a mixing have some, but I don't know what the city or county thinks about that. That's just a falling, bids that coming into the town, and I'm sure it's not being used. Appropriately.
No, I would agree that, as Jason said, the permit process, there's a lot that has to happen. And we will wait, I will be glad to take a wait and see process on all of that. So go ahead there. Oh, Stella, and yeah,
We can,
we weren't gonna
talk-
vote today anyway. This was sort of the introduction of the idea,
Yes,
if I understood correctly.
yes. And
Understood.
if we'd like to discuss, oh, do you just have a final comment?
Just a question, I know this would be many years away, this is not a leading question, but if we were to do private fundraising or attempt to increase how much fundraising we do, would this hinder our ability to do that? Would there be no effect? I just throw that out there as a practical question in terms of like ultimate net impact. Of course, maybe, I know we haven't done that private fundraising in a number of years, so we won't move anyway.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
I mean, we are able to through the donations acceptance procedure, to promote it more, but.
I mean, I work in philanthropy, obviously, and so I don't see it being a hindrance. I mean, Jen's comments are, to be heeded, as our Tony is. And as we said, this is a ways off, so I think we should consider if it gets to the point of accepting it, what it's used for, and make sure that it's unrestricted,
It's unrestricted.
apply our hands in any ways. I'm of the thinking, and I've thought about this for decades, that money has no parents. So if we can do what we want with it, and we want to do something that's strongly conservation minded to.
I'll just end by, it made me think of, LEAP is obviously part of Dominion, and Dominion's person sent me a letter for criticizing them once. So I'm no fan, but LEAP uses that to very good effect on the ground, and it kind of made me think of that parallel.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But-
And it's another one where they're required by the General Assembly to support the weatherization as part of their rate approvals, et cetera, so, but it absolutely is helping. Hundreds and hundreds of families locally with their weatherization.
I'll add, sorry,
That's a good point.
as part of negotiations for bigger projects like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which was ultimately defeated, and the Mountain Valley Pipeline, there were agreed donations in the tens of millions of dollars. Now, those are bigger projects, but, you know, they're in the same ballpark, so, you know, I don't know what the finale is of this, but maybe it could be out.
I think they're very generous.
Yeah.
We've got, my understanding when I asked for this was that we were essentially, about the budget for the R was 5,000. I thought I was done. But I think if I came back to them and said, consider 10,000, I don't know if they're probably too great. They're very generous.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. That's all good input, and we will, one of those things we can let cook for a while.
Unfortunately, I have to leave, so.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Tony.
Alrighty,
Thank you.
So just a brief update here, but as some of you might remember from our past RRBC meetings, our current work plan that covered the period of 2023 to 2027 is coming to a close here shortly. And the strategic plan, work plan guides the specific activities of the RRBC's designated funds for the successful administration of the program by the TJPDC. And this is our current work plan. And what it really includes is two main sections: program administration. So sharing information through our Facebook page, as well as promoting the conference. Our staff work to staff these board meetings and prepare materials and upkeep the website. Operational and fiscal management, preparing the budget and work program, and maintaining our finances in accordance with all the local laws. And then hosting the annual conference and all of the activities associated with that. And promoting coordination, local assistance and planning is the second section. So as requested, we're able to provide technical assistance to local partners through the RRBC, as well as through the grant that I manage for the PDC, the Watershed Implementation Plan. So we are able to support the development of local comprehensive plan chapters, environmental chapters specifically, and can reference goals to the basin, provide historical context, and then other forms of technical support, and preparing grant applications as identified. One thing that we completed as part of this work plan, which was more of a focused project, was modernizing the RRBC website, which has kind of gone through a big overhaul just because it hadn't been updated for probably a decade or two before that. So that was completed, and then we also worked with an intern to develop a historical story map and timeline of the Rivanna River as it relates to water quality and environmental justice. It was completed this year. And so I just wanted to show you that. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. I guess that's all from there. I'll just stop sharing here for a second. So we're planning to somewhat simplify the plan just to focus more of our efforts on planning for the annual conference and keeping a lot of the baseline program administration and community outreach and coordination within that. And last year, there was not very much engagement with the survey, but I did send out a survey to you all to help inform that. But I just wanted to point out here that for our next meeting, we will have a draft plan presented for your in-depth review, and then you'll adopt it in the next plan. So if you have any suggestions for things that you think would be great to include in the plan, you can tell me now or follow up with email, or maybe seeing the draft plan will help inspire that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
just wanted to give you an update there.
When is the annual conference?
That will be in September.
Do you have a date?
we don't have it determined yet. So now we
Usually
can,
the third Friday, but we'll
Yeah.
see how that goes.
now we can move on to the roundtable, which that's the first thing is potential RRBC conference topics.
Oh, okay. So where we've done solar stuff a number of years ago. What's the focus last year? Why am I drawing a blank?
Last year was data centers and
Oh,
water supply
That's
planning.
that's right, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that Julie Bolthouse, that was, yes, that was
Yeah.
fabulous.
And I really
I
like,
had forgotten that. Yeah,
I thought the venue was great.
it was.
This year as
The
well.
center did a really great job for us and we packed
The
that
center.
room.
You recommended that to me, actually.
Oh, it's good. Last year. Well, I mean, I'll be a broken record for sure, but I mean, PFAS is not going away. It's only getting more and more and more and more visible every time you turn around. So whether we pick up, get some presenters, Delegate Lopez there were a bunch of people who were very involved with the bills this year whom I interacted with, and they didn't all get all the way, but there may be something more to be talked about that will help everybody legislatively for next session. But I don't know any more about, that's just an undeveloped ideas right now, but all the localities are going to be paying, water users are going to be paying through the nose when people finally come to the understanding that, yes, Ravenna Water and Sewer is doing a fabulous job to clean what comes in the raw water to make it safe for drinking. But it's like nobody wants to look under the covers to see that there's all this stuff that's come in. And they are passive receivers, so it's not their fault. But all the makeup, all the disintegrating polyester, everywhere you turn in our life now is generating the microplastics and the PFAS. And sooner or later, the hammer is going to be dropped on our solid waste treatment facilities. And then the cost of that will be borne by ratepayers. So I hope that there will be state and federal legislation sometime in 2.5 more years that will be able to turn that ship more toward regulation. The EPA Local Government Advisory Committee, we were months from getting the framework going for treatment of solid waste for removal. So that got axed 2 Januaries ago, but hopefully it'll be back. EPA folks promise they have locked all the data away safely so that when the tide turns, they can just open those drawers and take it all out again and we'll take right off. We will see. We will see. But some of you might come up with other topics that are especially important locally and especially ways to bring new constituents to the meeting and learn about things. We've tried different ways to involve more broad across the community involvement with locations and with topics and formats and that kind of thing to try to widen. We don't want to just be preaching to the choir all the time because we have to expand our umbrella in order to have the success that we all need. Our grandchildren need for sure.
Your PFAS, would that include, you mentioned microplastics, because I'm horrified and I mean, there's plastics everywhere. We have it in our bodies now. We have it in everything we eat. Like you just eat something, I guess, fresh, hopefully. But I mean, is there a way to have something on that, like what you're eating and how not to, how to try to cleanse yourself of plastics as much as we can, but what is actually in your body because of the foods we eat and maybe even the water we drink. I mean, that would be something. I think people are scared or afraid of, I almost want to call it what's in your water, but then I'm afraid everyone would stop drinking water and buy sodas.
What's in your lunch?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what water was put on your lettuce and all those wonderful healthy vegetables?
Yeah.
You're irrigating with water that came out of a
I mean, maybe
contaminated water supply.
maybe something that's practical.
Yeah.
As opposed to, making people saying, I'm not gonna drink water, I'm not gonna eat, you know?
Well, someone did mention to me, and I'm totally drawing a blank on the title, there was some either book released or project going on about toxics, getting toxic free.
Yeah,
So
that
I
would
will
be,
find
yeah,
out,
yeah,
chase that person down and find out more details about that, because that may be a way to approach this.
yeah.
You have to
It-
head out.
Yeah, I need to leave. I have two nurses with very large needs waiting for.
Uh-oh, okay.
The product data that I passed out is the annual report for the stormwater conservation of Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
I would direct your attention to pages 16, 17, and 18. We talked a bit about the DCAP, CCAP, and ACAP programs. What you will see on those 3 pages are the DCAP, CCAP 2025, what we actually accomplished.
Right.
Keep in mind that those are urban programs. And so, I mean, the district covers a lot of rural territory that's not in the Rivanna watershed.
Mhm.
These programs are urban, they're in the Charlottesville, Scottsville. Most of the money that gets spent there is within the Rivanna watershed.
Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about what the legislature's doing with that money, those are dollars, and along with the contribution from Charlottesville, Elmont, those are dollars that get spent directly on water protection, both quantity and quality, from runoff in the watershed. And hopefully, next time around, we're working on the GIS layer that will tell us exactly how much we spent in the watershed, so that I don't have to kind of rewrite things.
That's awesome.
You'll have decimal points. I'll see you all next week.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Right.
Mills.
The other stuff is good too,
Oh.
16, 17, and 18.
Are there more copies of these at the office that we could pick up to share with? We need 3 more for city council and 4 more for board of supervisors. If you have that many in your bag, we'll be glad to rip them off.
Three I can do.
Okay.
I can get you.
All right. Very good. Okay.
Who usually attends the conference?
It's usually local planners, some elected officials, some members of the
City council.
public. I would like, to diversify it as much as possible. So any recommendations, ways to promote, location are all welcome.
Food's always a draw.
Yes, that was.
We've had
We've
successful
learned some
food trucks.
lessons.
Yeah,
We've learned some
food trucks have been great. They were, we actually had to change our county rules to be able to make sure. The first time we had the food truck, and I got permission to have the food truck, but then staff looked, it was sort of under the radar as far
Yeah,
as for the
stepped
conference
away.
people, and staff looked at it and went, food truck, and so it was a stampede down there, which was great. But Trevor said, we need to fix something for next time
Yeah.
to make sure. we're
And
not-
I don't think it
And we
even
took
made
care of
enough
it. It's all
money.
right.
We had to end up paying them because there weren't enough patrons.
Oh, that was
So
the
I don't
second
think-
person. The first year they ran out of food
I see.
because that was.
Well, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
if that happened.
That was the pizza versus the Thai place or whatever. We'll
Um,
figure it out.
There's only a few minutes left, so I just want to say the other thing under the roundtable is just if you have any updates related to the river or the Basin Commission on behalf of your jurisdiction, that's also welcome. Or any topics for our next meeting, presentation or discussion otherwise.
I guess the only update I have is that I think within the next month, the long expected, delayed and anticipated update to the riparian buffer standards is coming to the planning commission and then the board in
Great.
Ottawa. So we're trying to close the loopholes that are so big you could drive a school bus through them to be able to get control of the sort of Sunday afternoon bulldozing, which is what usually happens because no inspectors are on duty and often neighbors are away and you come back to find that this whole hillside has just been demolished.
That might be interesting to hear about in one of these meetings.
Okay, so that'll be updates. I know Lonnie's been working on it. We've all been slogging away on this for years, but he will get it first at the planning commission. So with that, my timing may be good.
Fingers
Hopefully it
crossed.
won't be another quarter before it gets here.
Yes, that's okay.
So,
The Charlottesville side were, related to the river because it goes around the river, the Loop de Ville Festival date is chosen for September 27th. So, explore the river in the 20-mile loop that's around the city. And that is in concert with other river activists and advocates. And a lot of river education comes along with that. Fun vendors will join us for Sunday walk, and we have a half loop this year that was started last year, so you can do 10 miles instead of the whole 20. And we have a family-friendly walk that's 3 miles this year, so. Yeah, so join us for
And
the
you said September 27th.
27th, it's a
What
Sunday.
day? Sunday.
It celebrates public, it's in tandem with Public Lands Day, so.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah, it's great.
So maybe that, I'll have to rummage around and see it that Friday right before.
I know,
Might
yeah,
be
that'd be a good
and then
tie-in.
Saturday-
Try it all together.
Yeah, the 25th.
Yeah, okay, good to know.
Okay.
Also, Riverfest is coming up May 9th.
Yes.
Yes,
And Tom is coming up.
yeah.
Yeah, I would add to that, in the city, updating our floodplain regulations is in neighborhood development services work plan.
Okay.
Who knows when and if that actually happens, but it's in the work plan, which is at least progress. And within a Parks and Rec master plan, one of the kind of visionary elements is the Ravenna River Access Plan and implementing that, which I think hopefully can connect to kind of a longer term vision of how the city is going to treat it as maybe something like a small scale river arts district. How do you build on things like the Ravenna Roots Festival? And we're gonna get a report within the next month on the Ravenna River Access Plan that's being developed, I think, by a group at UVA. So very interested to see the discussion that happens around it.
It's exciting.
And where would that be, Michael? The Ravenna River?
Sorry.
Where would that be, the location?
Well, the Roots Festival.
Hopefully multiple
right.
access
Oh,
points.
there's access, probably along 0 East High, right?
I think that's part of it, but I think
Yeah.
it's looking,
From Riverview north to the
Yeah.
Costco,
Because
basically.
What
Yeah,
I'm
it's-
thinking of is, we have that new Free Bridge Promenade, which is, we both own Dardentown Park and it's right there. And that allows for parking, but it also allows for some kind of a festival, arts and crafts.
I think it's definitely looking at kind of corridor wide, not just one area. I think you
Right.
get beyond like just physical access to parking, biking, but like amenities,
Boat access.
Yeah, like an economic development crossover, stewardship kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, we'll see what that they bring to us in the month. Yeah.
No,
Sure.
exciting.
and hopefully not destroying the natural asset.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Aren't you a part of the Biophilic Cities Initiative now?
Yes.
Yeah.
that doesn't-
Right. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's.
Don't tell the
Well, you can
people at
make
the
it mean
university
something
they will
maybe
have a
through
fit.
that.
I know our SWAC committee, the solid waste committee is saying, why is this come before the board? The application was filled out months ago.
Huh.
So I'm supposed to find out where it fell off the table or something like that, because that'll be good. That's fun. Yeah, I think down at the river company, those gatherings and things there have been great. And for people who don't live right in the neighborhood, it's always tricky to try to figure out, well, you park at Costner and walk through or whatever. So having all those, this was Sunday afternoon, they apparently were welcome, but nobody got scolded. Okay. There was nobody there at the business, but it's popular and tricky to get people there safely. And I'm just redoing the boat access and the stairs and this, the canoe slide and things like that we've done that at Dardentown a couple of years ago. I think it's still in pretty good shape. A number of years ago, some young entrepreneurs came to meet with, and it was when Dan Mahan was still at Parks and County at Dardentown, and they wanted to do some rock gardening, move some boulders around between the boat access and or upstream around the corner toward LCEC, where the bateau was parked, and to make some turbulence for kayaks. And I thought this was spectacular fun, and this has been done lots of other places. And of course, the parks people all went screaming in the other direction because of traffic and all this other stuff. And I thought, we can manage this. Come on. But anyway, it's one of those things that's still lurking, and maybe somebody will come up with some good attempt, and maybe there'll be a different point of view now. Who knows? Because new leadership is always good.
We are at 2:33, but if there are any other updates or their motion to adjourn.
So.
Second.
Okay.
Barring
Thank you all so
outrage, we
much.
are adjourned. Thank you. Okay. What is